37% leave their employer after coming back from parental leave. 90% feel there's no support, So then you can start to quantify the actual cost of not prioritizing this problem.
I had no idea parental leave was such a big problem, so I decided to find out. In this episode of Startup Fika, I spoke to Astrid from Lea Health, a platform that is built for employees to guide them through their parental leave journey. We talked about why this is a bigger problem than most companies realize, how Lea Health is solving it, and what you can do to make sure it doesn't happen in your company. Anyways, happy International Women's Day, and let's get into it. All right, thank you so much, Astrid, for taking the time for Startup Fika. Hey!
Hey!
For everyone that doesn't know, tell me a little bit about yourself, what Lea does, and how it started.
So my name's Astrid, and I'm one of the co-founders of Lea. We actually started back in 2020, early 2022, late 2021, as a postpartum health app. So for those of you who don't know what postpartum is, it's basically the year of recovery after childbirth. My co-founder Sandra and I come from a business background and many years in kind of enterprise, where I actually acknowledged the problem that we're now solving earlier on. And then I met my co-founder Sandra. She was currently then working with product at Natural Cycles. And for those of you who don't know, Natural Cycle is one of the biggest and kind of female health products out there. So they digitalized contraceptive. And we kind of identified the issue that there was a lot of information and a lot of kind of support in the kind of reproductive field earlier on, so kind of infertility and pregnancy, but there was no information and there was no kind of support or health solutions after you've given birth. And we obviously, as most kind of female founders in women's health, it comes from a self-lived experience. So we started there, built a product that digitalized the kind of postpartum recovery. So screened for postpartum depression, screened for birth injuries, and helped to educate and build personalized recovery journeys after that. So that's how we started. And we actually started direct to consumer to kind of understand and their needs. We had then an evolution going more kind of towards B2B because we saw that the majority of the women that we were supporting were also struggling from a workplace perspective, trying to kind of balance that new identity, new life, new circumstances with coming back to work. So we started supporting companies, just supporting their female employees from a health perspective. And within that journey, we kind of stumbled upon this hidden problem that we are now solving, which is kind of parental leave management or parental health management for companies at B2B. So what Lea now is building is the infrastructure to enable parental leave at scale for enterprise.
And how would you say that experience going from customer to B2B shaped what you guys do today?
Well, I think it's the most recommended route, I would say, for kind of product development, because it's not a solution that comes from one survey or, someone going, I think this could be fit. It comes from data, right? So we've spent years collecting data that kept showing us the right path to go. And I think it also comes down to just kind of listening to your customers, right? When we started, we were listening, okay, what's the problem? We're in the parental health. Okay, the problem are already kind of usually comes up because of attrition or churn or sick leave. And then we started digging into that. Then we understood the pain point was that there was actually no process around parental leave. There was no data collected. It was very fragmented, very ad hoc and person-to-person based. And that's how I think you get to a real kind of core solution that adds value. You keep asking those questions and you keep digging. And I think it's also very important to, and this is such a cliche, but it's so true, to fall in love with the problem and not the solution, right? Because when we started, it was like, oh, we're femtech, and it's a very close-knit, community, and we knew that world so well, female health, we knew it from a European perspective. And then now we're in HR tech, very different world, very different environment, but we're still driven by that mission to support the next 1 billion parents, to ensure that they have the right tools to really thrive and not just survive during this period. So very much driven by the problem we're trying to solve, but you have to be very open to the context switching based on where the data takes you, basically.
Yeah, and through that journey, you've kind of restarted different times. And for everyone watching that's maybe starting their first venture and getting those first customers, what kind of recommendations would you give for someone maybe starting B2C or and then later on going to B2B? How did you acquire those first customers for you guys?
Oh, God. I mean, enterprise takes forever. Just want to put that out there for anyone looking to move into the B2B enterprise space. It will take 3 times longer than you ever thought it would. But again, I think it comes down to understanding the needs of the people that you're trying to sell to, right? Understanding, where are the pain points? Our point, like from our point of view, we were highlighting a problem that they had no clue about. Because parental leave today is incredibly manual, fragmented, and no data has been collected, they didn't have data that this was an issue. And unless you have data, you can't translate that into cost. And unless you have a cost attached to it, you will never prioritize it, because you will only prioritize things, change management, if it's something that's costing you or something that will give you more revenue. And that, in combination with that this is still a very stigmatized area, means that it was very much a hidden problem. So you had to, it's not something that you can just knock on the door going, we're doing this 10 times better than the other, developer you have, the other kind of solution that you're using. It was a very long path of education of like, okay, have you looked at your data? No. Are you collecting this data? No. Do you want to start collecting this data? Yes. And then you kind of learn together. So there's no quick fixes, unfortunately. I mean, for some companies in fintech or such, yes. But when you're trying to kind of create systematic change and you're building a segment within HR that hasn't been done before, then you have to add at least 3 times the long sales cycle from an educational point of view. So I think that's how we acquired our first customers. It's like, okay, we need to explore this together. Are you open to do a workshop with the people team? Should we do a survey looking at all the employees who've previously gone on parental leave, what their experience was? Should we start collating this data? So it's a collaborative approach, I would say, for them to come to a point where they're like, yes, this is a problem. Yes, we now have the data to be able to kind of raise it and prioritize it.
I myself kind of struggle okay, how can I show the data when it kind of doesn't really exist? There's some hints here and there. So what kind of tactics have you guys used and found more successful early on compared to now?
So we realized that unless we go to every single company and get them to do some kind of, survey or workshop, we're not going to be able to collect this kind of data fast enough. We decided to create the benchmark for parental leave management by doing a national report. So by actually quantifying this problem and creating awareness around it for that. So we collaborated with Women in Tech Sweden and Unconventional Ventures, which is a VC that focuses on underrepresented founders, but they did a yearly report on looking at the different kind of capital from an underrepresented founder perspective. So they know these kind of reports. And we interviewed and sent surveys to about 125 employees and HR leaders in some of the biggest companies in Sweden in about 8 different industries. And through that, we not only got quantifiable data on the HR leaders' experience and their perception of the support and the structure they were giving, but we also got the employees' perception and like the real world data of how do they see this. And that's when we started to get those kind of quantifiable, data from anything from, 37% leave their employer after coming back from parental leave, around 30% more if it's only women go on sick leave, 90% feel there's no support, So then you can start to quantify the actual cost of not prioritizing this problem, of not working with this problem. And then obviously with our customers as well, we have customers in 6 markets. So we're in the Nordics, but also in UK and Southeast Asia. Collecting that data is another way of continuously creating proof points of the value that you bring, but also the cost that you're kind of saving and prioritizing it. So it's a continuous journey, of course, but it is key, because without the data, you only have a hypothesis. You need to really be able to show, what's the ROI, what is the long-term gains, what are the short-term gains. And that can sometimes be tricky when you work with something that's more kind of preventive. We're preventing someone leaving. We're preventing someone being sick. And how do you quantify that? I was like, that person would have gotten sick. How do you know that? Well, because we screened them for postpartum depression and we got them into, healthcare much earlier. So it's not also a short game, it's a long game as well. So we're not making it easy for ourselves, but it's a very important one. So we work data analytics.
Yeah, so basically creating the data you will use on your clients, right?
Yeah.
And in practice, now that we've covered kind of how to acquire your first customers in this space, what are the first things that tend to break when an employee goes on parental leave?
So usually what happens is, 80% of the global workforce today are parents, right? So usually in any big company, it's the largest cohorts. And it's usually parental leave then becomes one of the most kind of common and recurring HR kind of flows. But what happens is there's usually a very big gap between creating a policy and actually translating it into practice. So legally, you have to have a policy. So everyone has a policy, but it's usually not very well thought through. It's like, this is probably bog standard. Let's generic. Let's put that out there. Some companies actually put a lot of effort into doing them, but that's where it stops. So what happens then usually is that HR has, they usually manage how we're going to work with parental leave, but the actual ownership of the process is with the leaders, with the managers, because they are the one that are actually having the conversation with the employees. They are the one doing offboarding meetings, usually reboarding meetings. Well, they don't have reboarding meetings. That's one of the issues, but that should kind of lead and drive the journey. But what happens is, because there's no process, there's no digital process, there's no kind of education, nothing to lean on, it's very hard for leaders to navigate this journey. Because having it, even doesn't matter if you're first, second, or third, is one of the most overwhelming transitions from an employee's work life. Everything changes, new circumstances, new times, new logistic, all these different things. And if you're coming back and you have a leader that doesn't understand or acknowledge that even, or meet you where your needs are, you're going to start to feel that potentially this is not a company where I stick around in this phase of my life. This is not a company that sees that, supports that, and creates an environment where I can still thrive, but still have a family. And it feels so, that everyone should get this, but they don't. And the reason for that is because there's no digital process and nothing is being measured. They have no clue if the leader even has a meeting about, handover or offboarding. They have no clue if they've ever got a congratulatory email about the kid. They have no clue if they get any reboarding. The data shows that 90% don't even get a reboarding. So in Sweden, you can be away for a year. A lot of things happen under a year. And it's like, okay, welcome back, Astrid. That's your desk. Go.
Good luck.
And it's very hard, to succeed in those circumstances. So usually that's the employee experience of not being seen, not being heard, and not given the tools to succeed when you're coming back. And from a manager perspective, it's just like very hard to navigate, because if you have employees in different markets, everything is different policies, different regulations, different support, different length, different health support, different benefits. And I mean, you can be the best manager in the world, but if you don't have kids and you haven't been on parental leave, it's going to be impossible for you to meet your employee where they are. And even though you do have kids and haven't been on parental leave, this is not a one-size-fits-all solution. Every single experience is so individual. You can have birth trauma, you can have all these different things, and you don't have a clue, right? So it's impossible for leaders to actually meet them where they are unless they have the tools and the support to do that. And that's usually what drives both attrition, but also drives a lot of kind of lack of engagement, disengagement, lack of productivity. You just don't feel you're kind of surviving, but you're not thriving in a sense that you could.
Yeah, it's almost like maybe the CEOs have lived on a certain standard. And now you're coming here and come like, hey, this standard isn't correct. Just because something has been working doesn't mean it's the right thing, right?
And you're so right. I think one of our hardest markets is actually Sweden, because we believe the hype of our own narrative around the parental mecca, right? And we are very good at giving long and well-paid and equal parental leaves. And we should, we should really congratulate ourselves for that. But the problem is that it's equally many employees who actually change job after parental leave to other countries who don't support. And there's equally amount of people going on sick leave or, disengaging. So it's actually a more costly problem in Sweden because you still have the same amount of people leaving, but then you have to pay to re-recruit and you're already just paid for 1 year of parental pay. So it's like double the cost of you not actually finding an employee journey that supports and retains your employees. And these are usually quite senior people. So these are talent that you've invested a lot of, money into, and you're losing them because you can't support them in the most overwhelming life phase in their career, and you're not even measuring it, which is an insanely high risk.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely spot on how you formulated it. I really, I had no idea this was such a big problem. Then, of course, I am not in that category yet. But let's pretend there's a company out there and wanted to sense like a self-check whether their parental leave actually works. What's one thing they should look out for?
The data. Maybe start looking at, how many leave within 1 year of coming back. How many of people going on parental leave take sick leave? Usually women coming back from parental leave takes twice as many sick leave days as men. And that is very tied to the problem that we were solving in the beginning. 80% of postpartum health issues go undiagnosed. Postpartum depression, birth injuries, postpartum care is not great. So there's a lot of health issues around it. And I would also kind of look at your own process of like, what's our process today? What are the different steps? Who owns every step? And how do we measure these steps? And 99% will see that it's very fragmented and nothing is being measured. So I would start of actually, looking what's the best touch point for us to start collect this data. Should we include it in exit conversations? Should we include these questions in our employee surveys? Should we start tracking, how many managers have offboarding meetings? Employees know about the policies. So starting to kind of create data to be able to make a decision of, is this working or is it not? And then you will be able to see from the data, what are the steps that is not working? Usually, it's the coming back part. Usually you're quite good leading up to parental leave with handovers and such, but it's the coming back that is usually where it all goes out the window, and that's usually what drives employees to leave.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a company out there, make sure to follow these steps. And through all the data that you guys have collected, what kind of thing or data point surprised you the most?
I mean, I worked in women's health and now I'm doing this. So I'm usually not easily shocked of the bad data. But I must say, I think it was 70% both, like from both genders, who were really anxious and scared about how having a family would affect their careers. I think that's the shocker because, I mean, like I said, 80% of the workforce, and it's kind of crucial for the continuation of the human race. So it is something that just should work, right? And then I think it was about 20 or 30% that answered that they had actually pushed having a family because of the low support from their existing employer. And if you take into consideration the macro aspects of that, we have a massively declining birth rates, massively declining labor participation, this is becoming a societal problem. If you are not building a system of support for parents, they're not going to have kids, right? And if you, from an employee perspective, are going to lose talent or have them shift, these choices because you're not supporting, you're 100% going to lose talent. So I think those numbers were very shocking. I knew about the almost 40% leave after coming back from parental leave, but I know that number shocks a lot of people. And what I think is really interesting as well, I don't know what you think, but I think before we started getting the data, everyone was just like, yeah, but that's the way it is, right? People just leave after parental leave. It was just an accepted fact. And people thought it was because, you started thinking about, I'm going to do that, book cafe / wine gallery that I was thinking about. And it's not. It's not, I'm going to shift my life and start, doing a puppy, adaptation or whatever, it is because you're being set up to fail from the current system, right? So I also got shocked about the fact that, 40% leave almost, but it's just the way it is. It's just shouldn't be. Very bad business.
You're doing amazing work out there, and I truly believe in the journey you're doing is something vitally important for the future of humankind. Like, look at South Korea, for instance. Their future isn't looking super bright when it comes to these kind of topics. But yeah, just wrap. Sorry, did you want to say something?
No, I was just agreeing. I mean, we have had both Chinese and Korean company reach out, wanting to collaborate different avenues, because they are paying women right now to have kids. It's like, but that's the wrong way around. You have to build the support system for women to have kids, and not just give them a couple of hundred.
Definitely. All right, Astrid, you've been amazing. I just want to kind of wrap this up with this question. If you could go back into the start of your entrepreneurial journey and stand on the shoulders of young Astrid starting all of this, what advice would you give her?
Just do it. It took me longer to start my own business, I think. This is my second startup that I run, and I think sometimes you believe an old narrative, right? And that's really detrimental for your own journey. I think I believe that, to be a successful entrepreneur, you had to be, a 25-year-old white dude with no, and I had, 2 kids and was like 35, I was like, is this I gonna be able to do it all? But I think I tell everyone that you should just, walk your own path and create your own narrative. And I think it goes hand in hand with the problem we're trying to solve, right? Just because, external factors change doesn't mean it's a negative thing. You just have to find a new way to do it.
You only fail if you give up, right?
100%. 100%. And I think for every founder that does something new, which I think most founders do, right? Otherwise they wouldn't start a business. Then it's like the unknown is immense, right? You have to be so comfortable with uncertainty. And if you're not, it's going to be a painful journey. And I know founders that are killing themselves with stress because they're very uncomfortable with unknown. So I think it's really important also to ask yourself, is this a journey where I'm happy and that I can really thrive in? Or is this one where I will hit the ground and feel really bad or hit the wall, sorry. And if you're uncertain, then you go work at a startup, I think I usually tell people, because a lot of people just see these amazing stories about, Lovable or, Spotify, and they're like, I want to do that. But it's a tough job, So I think it's also good to understand why you want to do it.
You've given great advice, and I truly hope that Lea continues growing and hopefully solve this problem worldwide. Thank you so much for being part of Startup Fika. This has been Mohammed and Astrid. See you guys.
Thank you.